Okay, today is August 10, 2023. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes Storage Special Interest Group. As a reminder, this meeting is public, recorded, and posted on YouTube. On the agenda, we're going to go over the 128 planning. We're approaching the end of the cycle. We're going to get status updates to see what landed, what didn't land. The upcoming deadlines here on the 8th of August, this actually just passed, was the docs deadline, the date by which docs must be completed and reviewed. The next upcoming deadline is the actual 128 release, which is targeted at the 15th of August, so coming up fairly quickly. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our planning spreadsheet and start getting our final statuses here for this release. Let me go ahead and add a column here for today. Okay, so first up, we have recovering from resize failures, get API changes merged into 128. Still need support for Quas. Do we have Hemant?
Yeah, I'm here.
Does anybody know if we were able to get the docs changes in here? Looks like the code was able to merge.
Yeah, the doc changes was done. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Say that again.
Doc changes were merged too.
Awesome. Is there any remaining outstanding work here?
The external resizer needs to be updated. I have a PR out there for review. And Sunny was reviewing it. Like, I would appreciate more reviews on that.
Got it. So it's pretty much there. I'm going to mark one of these as done and the other one has started as a reminder that there's a little bit outstanding work there. Thanks, Hemant. Next, we have provision volumes from cross namespace snapshot, PVC, continue design work, volume populator work in progress. Any updates on this one? Michelle, do you have any updates on this one?
Oh, I think there is, I'm actually not sure if the cap has been updated for this. I think we can check. But yeah, I don't have any updates.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna mark this as no update for now. All right, next up we have CSI volume health, additional metrics and or events, add end-to-end tests, alpha for this cycle. This was work in progress last time we checked. Any updates on this one?
No update. I think it's still in progress, but I haven't heard any update on that yet.
Got it. Okay, next we have the change block tracking design. Went to SIG auth for feedback last time. Anything new here?
Yeah, so we discussed about this in yesterday's data protection group meeting. They have updated the cap to incorporate this new change suggested by SIG auth to use the token request. Also, there is a prototype, so they showed that in yesterday's meeting. So we are in good shape. So the next step would be, I think the CSI spec PR needs to be updated. And then we want to planning for to target alpha in 1.29.
Got it. Okay, so I think on the CSI spec side, we just had the modified volume changes go in. And maybe we can wait for this change block tracking changes to go in as well. And then we can cut it.
I think we don't have to wait about because that we have not, let's see. So modified volume, I guess we're not like have to get that release cut that soon because that's also for 1.29, right? So
exactly.
Maybe that's fine. Exactly. I guess we can wait.
Yeah, I'm thinking we can set a date for 129 and just cut it at some point, and hopefully we'll get both in there before that point.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, we can discuss that one at the CSI meeting.
Okay.
Thanks, Hooks. Next we have enable privilege containers for Windows to replace CSI proxy for Windows out of tree. Any updates on this one?
No updates yet, unfortunately. We are busy with some internal priorities and we haven't had a chance to look at it. I would like to understand one thing, how urgent is this feature at this point? I think we will probably have some bandwidth to work on it in the next few weeks, but I don't want to hold off. If there's interest in other people working on this, I don't want anybody to feel like they have to wait for us to work on it, essentially. So
Yeah, it's a good question. So my understanding is that Windows already has a solution, which is the proxy, and it's working. This is a nice to have in some situations, and I think Ben would argue that it's the wrong direction, but I don't think it's urgent. So
yeah, so Ben and I have had some discussions around this. I think we do see a path forward for this, if I understood it right, Ben, where for certain categories of plugins, at least it would make sense to move to the privileged container model, even if that doesn't work very well for everything. And I think there are some benefits in terms of the overall architecture as well that seem to justify doing the work. I just don't know if we have the bandwidth to work on it right away. That was the only concern. So
the only point hey, can you all hear me?
yeah,
yes.
Go for it, Ben.
Okay.
Yep.
The only point I was trying to make earlier is there should be an option to use the proxy. I think having privileged containers is great. I think there's plenty of applications for privileged containers. I think running a CSI plugin in a privileged container is fine. I just think that for security reasons, it's better not to. And I wouldn't want to take away the option on Windows. And on Linux, I wish that there was an option to use a proxy. That's sort of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. And I think whatever we decide on how exactly that option would get surfaced, we should think about, if we do this in the future, a proxy for Linux, what that would look like, and make sure those APIs would align. Is it a per CSI driver option? Is it something that Kubernetes or we set on the Kubernetes side, etc.? And whatever we decide, hopefully we can carry forward to Linux in the future.
I mean, we have like over 100 CSI drivers, right? And most of them will never change to accept using a proxy. So it would have to be some sort of an option where you can say, look, if you want to run your CSI plugin in a mode where it's not privileged and it's outsourcing all of its privileged operations to this proxy thing, then you can do that.
Yeah, so you're imagining more Kubernetes side option that an administrator would set and force all the CSI drivers through a proxy.
Oh, no, you could never leave this up to an admin. It would be like for a storage vendor that wanted to make their driver more secure.
Yeah,
they could run it non-privileged and outsource all their, but that's like a ton of code changes you have to do, right? You have to remove all your ISCSI code, all your NFS code, all your mount code, and push it to something external.
I guess the question though is like, who are we? Is the purpose then to shift the security burden to someone else from CSI driver to say the cluster admin?
No,
like
the idea
just moving the privilege operations from one process to another process, but somebody still has to maintain that other process.
Yeah. I mean, there's a maintenance burden on the proxy, but the main benefit would be the proxy would be very small, and it would only do the things that had to be privileged. Anything that doesn't need to be privileged, you don't put there. So like there's just like there's a handful of operations that require elevated privilege. And if you can centralize those in one code base and have everyone share it and everyone contribute to like debugging it and maintaining it, then like that's way easier to audit than all of the node plugins of all of the CSI drivers, even if they're open source, right? Some of them aren't even open source, and there's no way to know what's going on there. But even the open source ones, they're too big. It'd be easier to audit some small thing that's only 1,000 lines and just does a few. I mean, I don't know. Depending on how many features you put in there, it might grow to be larger. But ideally, you could have one that just does the very, very common things like mounting, attaching iSCSI devices, and maybe some NFS stuff. I don't know what else is super common.
I guess the challenge there is that there's also a wide variety of protocols that drivers might use. And so the scope of the proxy could also increase in order to support all of those protocols.
So we would have to pick the ones where the value was worth it, right? You get enough bang for your buck on that. If there's one driver that has one weird proprietary protocol, we say, sorry, you're stuck doing your own thing. But for the ones where there's a lot of commonality, and the really big one is mounting, right? The reason that the Kubernetes docs say you must run your node privilege or your node pod privilege is because you need to be able to do mounts with propagation. And there is no way to grant an unprivileged pod the ability to do mounts with propagation.
Got it. So, I mean, I think there are a couple of things there that I heard which were interesting. One was that you said that if you decide to do this, then it may be a good idea to do it in a way that, the Linux proxy, if it's ever developed, ends up having a similar architecture or interface or something like that. So if that's the case, then do we need to have like a broader discussion around what this entails? Like, what are we talking about in terms of where are we drawing the lines in terms of what should be part of the Windows privilege container and what should not be? Is that something that's spelled out clearly already or no?
Do we have a list of companies asking for this feature, and at least we have a few use cases that we can refer to?
Which feature, the Windows or the Linux?
The Windows and the Linux.
I don't think anyone is asking for the Linux version of this except for me. And it's only because I've been scarred by lots of security investigations into node plugins.
Okay, so what about the Windows side of it though? Like, how many are there customers who have indicated interest in this? Because I think I personally have not heard of anybody come to us and say that we would be really interested in this. We thought that this was an interesting project and it had some relevance to what we are doing in the CSI driver side at AWS. So that's why we were looking at it. But I'm curious to understand what is like the big use case that we are trying to address through it. So
I think, at least from my perspective, the main challenge I have with the CSI proxy is just the maintainability, because now we have to deal with version skew of 2 different components and having to, upgrade the 2 components in sync or at least in a compatible way. And that has been a challenge.
Right. And I think that has been our experience as well, that using the CSI proxy is a bit of a, in terms of maintainability, it's a harder thing to do, partly because of the version skew that you mentioned, but also just the way it integrates into the overall CSI driver implementation is not very, I don't know, clean, I guess. So
I'd like to understand the 2 sources of version skew. How is this different than a sidecar? Is it because it's shared by multiple CSI drivers in principle?
It's because the sidecars are in a pod. So when you upgrade your pod, everything gets upgraded together. But CSI proxy is a binary running on kubelet. And so that's managed through some different mechanism. And so you can potentially have version skew where like CSI proxy is upgraded on a different schedule than the CSI driver.
Right. Okay, I get it. I guess my vision of a proxy is it is running a pod. It's running a privileged pod, and then the regular node plugin doesn't need to be privileged anymore. but there
Okay.
might be technical reasons why that wouldn't work. I haven't thought about it deeply enough to understand like how you would secure that the connection between those two pods. I just really like the idea of shrinking the amount of code that is running privileged to the minimum set.
With privileged, I forget, is privileged a per container setting or is it a per pod setting?
I think it's a pod setting, not container.
Because if it's a per container setting, what you could potentially do is have the proxy run as a sidecar within the CSI driver. And that way everything does get upgraded in lockstep and you just do, communication through localhost. But if you can't do per container privilege settings, then that doesn't help.
I'd be surprised if you
per
could do per
container.
container privileges.
This per container.
It's per container, yeah.
Yeah, we run driver registrar as unprivileged and the driver is privileged, for example.
Is that true on Windows?
I don't know.
It might be different on Windows. I don't know either.
Okay, so I mean, like I said, I think this is something that we are interested in doing. I don't see a strong customer use case, and I was also a little bit confused by a blog post that I just linked to a little while back in the chat window, which said something about the fact that host process containers, which is the Windows equivalent to Linux privileged containers, is finally GA in Kubernetes 126. And I was wondering how that work ties into the work that we are talking about for the privileged containers. So
I think let's keep this meeting moving. Overall, it sounds like this is an interesting topic. We're likely not going to get to it in the 128 timeframe.
yes, I agree with that.
We'll punt this to 129 and continue the discussion. And my guess is we'll probably end up doing both if we have the cycles to do both on the Windows side and on the Linux side. So let's continue the discussion.
Okay, sounds good.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks for the update. Next, we have SE Linux relabeling using mount options. CSI driver API changes beta on by default again. Jan, any updates on this one?
So, okay, so in 128, everything is done. In 127, I exported the fix, but the feature is disabled by default, and I'm not sure I'm going to enable it ever by default. So yeah, 128 is done basically.
Got it. Any other follow-up work left here?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Thanks. I'll go ahead and mark this one as done then. And these two are for the 130 release. We're going to skip over that. Then we've got the Ceph RBD and Ceph FS migrations. Any status updates on these? Looks like code was merged, docs PR in review. Did the docs PRs get merged here?
Sorry, are you talking about the
Ceph.
Ceph one? Yes, I think those are the Ceph RBD and Ceph FS. Those are done. I think I can mark those as done.
Okay, next we have better default storage class, moving to GA this cycle. Looks like docs PR was merged, placeholder blog PR was created. Anything left here?
Blog is still on review, but it has a GTM from our side.
Okay. I think we go ahead and mark it done from our side then.
Yep.
Thanks, Sean. And then quality of service for volumes. Sunny, you want to give an update on this one?
Yeah, so the CSI spec is finally merged. So I think we can start implementation. I see a few people assigned the task is also on this call, just an FYI
Cool. Thanks, Sunny. I'm gonna go ahead and mark. I guess this is partially completed. It's not alpha. Maybe if we change this to quality of service volumes, CSI spec, then we can call this done. And then the next cycle, we'll do the Kubernetes side of this.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. Thank you. Next, we have robust volume manager reconstruction beta on by default in 128.
That's the same like as Linux. I would say it's done.
I'm done. Cool. Thank you, Jan. And next one is PV last phase transition time.
So block is merged and the block is on review and has LGTM from our side.
Awesome. I will go ahead and mark this one as done as well.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jan. Next, we have storage capacity scoring. Let's say we haven't had an update on this one for a while. So I'm gonna mark this as started but not done. Well, I guess we'll leave it at started and get it moved over to the next cycle. All right, next we have SIG apps volume expansion for stateful sets. Any update on this one?
Same as last time. Actually, there was design. KEP is out there for review. It was reviewed by Apps team, but I think the original author had some other priorities for a while. So I don't know if he's back on implementing it. I'll check with him and update. So yeah.
Got it. Cool. Thanks for the update, Hemant. So we'll get this moved over to the next cycle as well. Next is non-graceful node shutdown. Anything new on this one?
This one is complete. So the doc PRs merged, blocks merged. Done.
Awesome. Thanks, Sharon. That is done. Okay, we can go back to our agenda doc. It doesn't look like there's any PRs to discuss or designs to review. Any other discussions anybody wants to bring up today? All right, thanks a lot, folks. We will reconvene in 2 weeks. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.